Georgia the Guinea Pig Fairy by Daisy Meadows. Chapter 1. Farmyard Fun. This must be one of the cutest animals in the whole of Strawberry Farm, Rachel Walker declared, her eyes shining. She stroked the woolly lamb in her arms. He's so cuddly. And hungry too, her best friend Katie Tate chuckled. She tilted up the bottle of milk she was holding to feed the lamb under the watchful eye of the farmhand. He's nearly finished already. He's making me thirsty just watching him, her mum said as the lamb drained the last few drops. Rachel was staying with Kirsty's family for a week over the Easter holidays. This afternoon they were having a great time at Strawberry Farm. They'd already seen a troop of tiny ducklings venturing out for their first swim on the pond and enjoyed a pony ride on a sturdy little brown Shetland called Conker. Then, when a farmhand had announced that he wanted some volunteers to help him feed some lambs, Rachel and Kirsty had jumped at the chance. Rachel put the lamb down carefully and both girls watched him gambol off to join the other lambs in the field. I saw a sign for Pet's Corner over there, Rachel said with a meaningful look at Kirsty. Shall we go there next? Kirsty smiled at her friend, picking up on Rachel's message at once. The two girls shared a wonderful secret. They'd been helping the pet keeper fairies of Fairyland all week. Nasty Jack Frost had kidnapped the pet fairy's 7 magical pets and had taken them all to his ice castle. But the pets had managed to escape and make their way into the human world. Yesterday, Rachel and Kirsty had helped Bella the bunny fairy find her lost rabbit. And the day before they had reunited Katie the kitten fairy with her missing kitten. So Kirsty knew exactly what Rachel was hoping. Perhaps they'd find another magical pet today in Pet's Corner. Sounds lovely, but I think I'll opt out and go for a coffee, Mrs. Tate said. Shall I meet you both back here at 4 o'clock? Good idea, Kirsty replied, trying not to sound too enthusiastic. Much as she loved her mum, she and Rachel had always had the very best of adventures when they were alone. See you later. Mrs. Tate went towards the tea room and the two friends headed for Pet's Corner. Here we are, Rachel said as they entered an area surrounded by a small fence. Keep your eyes peeled for any magical pets who might be here, she added in an exciting way. The girls began looking at all the rabbits and guinea pigs in their hutches and runs. Every animal had a little sign outside its cage telling visitors its name and favourite food. Ah, this rabbit is called Albie and he likes carrot tops and Brussels sprout peelings, Kirsty read aloud, peeping in at the fluffy grey rabbit. Hello, Albie. Rosie the guinea pig likes sunflower seeds and lettuce leaves, Rachel read further along the row of hutches. Millie, her sister, likes sliced apple and carrot. Rosie's baby likes carrot. Oh. Kirsty looked up. What's wrong? She asked. Rachel was crouching down and peering into one of the runs. There were supposed to be 3 guinea pigs in here, Millie, Rosie and baby Carrot, she told Kirsty. But the baby guinea pig is missing. Kirsty hurried over. Oh dear, look, she said. The cage door's open a crack. Carrot must have escaped. Out of the corner of her eye, Rachel suddenly spotted a flash of fur behind the hutches. She turned to see a small orange and white guinea pig squeezing under the wooden fence. That must be Carrot over there, she said. Kirsty fixed the cage door firmly shut and then jumped up to take a look. Oh no, he's heading for that field of sheep, she said, pointing. Rachel looked anxious and headed off after the guinea pig. He's too young to be out on his own, she said. We've got to rescue him, Kirsty. Magic in mid-air. Kirsty and Rachel clambered over the wooden fence surrounding the field of sheep and hurried after the guinea pig, who was now scampering busily towards a tree on the far side of the field. But both girls stopped and stared in disbelief when the guinea pig reached the base of the tree. for instead of stopping or swerving around the tree, the little animal simply ran straight up the trunk. "I didn't think guinea pigs could do that," Kirsty gasped. "I'll go after him in case he gets stuck." Kirsty clambered up into the tree and picked her way from branch to branch until she was within arm's reach of the little guinea pig, who was watching her curiously. "Hello," Kirsty said in a soft voice, reaching out towards him. As she did so, the guinea pig twitched his nose and backed away playfully. Kirsty stretched out her hand a little further. "Come here, little carrot," she said coaxingly. Again the guinea pig backed away, and Kirsty thought she glimpsed a whiskery little smile on his face as he did so. "I'm imagining things now," Kirsty said to herself. She inched a little further along the branch and then leaned out in an effort to reach the guinea pig. Just as her fingertips were about to reach Carrot's fur, he jumped right off the branch and scampered merrily away through the air. Kirsty nearly fell out of the tree in surprise. "Rachel, look!" she cried excitedly, scrambling back down to the ground. Rachel felt a delicious thrill of excitement as she realised what was happening. "That's not Carrot the farm guinea pig," she laughed. "It must be Georgia the Guinea Pig Fairy's magic pet." She and Kirsty had met all the pet keeper fairies in Fairyland. "I wonder where Georgia is." At that very moment, the girls suddenly heard the sound of cheerful singing above them and looked up to see Georgia herself swooping towards them on the back of a blackbird. "Georgia!" Rachel cried, waving at the pretty fairy. Georgia waved back cheerily as the blackbird perched near the girls on a branch tree. She had short black hair and she wore a tan-coloured top and suede skirt, both edged with a fringe of turquoise beads and tassels. She smiled as she slipped off the blackbird's back and thanked him for the ride. The blackbird chirruped a merry reply and fluttered away. Georgia flew over to Rachel's shoulder, her gauzy wings shimmering in the sunlight. "Hello, girls," she said in a clear silvery voice. "We're looking for a lost guinea pig called Carrot," Kirsty explained eagerly, "but we found your magic pet instead, Georgia." Georgia twirled in mid-air excitedly when she heard that. "I thought he was here somewhere nearby," she declared, looking around. "Oh, Sparky, hello," she called, seeing the little orange and white guinea pig trotting along in mid-air. "I've missed you so much." Rachel smiled as Sparky squeaked joyfully in reply to his fairy owner and began scampering towards her. Meanwhile, the little fairy was listening to Sparky's eager squeaks. "He says that he's been looking for Carrot too," she told the girls, and... But before Georgia could translate any more of Sparky's message, one of the sheep who had been grazing nearby suddenly leapt up onto its hind legs. To everybody's amazement, the sheep then produced a butterfly net, swept it through the air, and captured Sparky. "Hey!" Kirsty yelled. "What's going on?" "That's not a sheep," Rachel called out in horror, seeing a long green nose pointing out from the creature's woolly face. "It's a goblin in disguise." Goblins Undercover. A gleeful cackle floated through the air as the goblin ran across the field with Sparky trapped in the butterfly net. "Oh no," Kirsty cried. "What are we going to do now?" "I'll turn you into fairies so we can fly after him," Georgia said quickly, waving her wand over the girls. A stream of glittering turquoise sparkles swirled out from the top of her wand and whirled around Kirsty and Rachel. In an instant, both girls shrank down to become tiny fairies. Rachel fluttered her shimmering wings, enjoying the feeling of being as light as air as she floated off to the ground. Being a fairy was just about the best thing in the whole world, but now the girls had work to do. "Let's follow that sneaky goblin," she cried, zooming through the air after him. "Don't worry, Sparky, we're coming," Kirsty added, following Rachel. But as they flew over the field of sheep, several more sheep jumped up on their behind legs and began swiping at Kirsty, Rachel and Georgia. More goblins in sheep disguises. "Now they're chasing us," Rachel warned, looking back over her shoulder to see the goblins racing after them with butterfly nets in their hands and nasty grins on their faces. "Fly higher!" Georgia urged the girls. "Don't let them catch you too." Kirsty, Rachel and Georgia flew up out of reach of the goblins as they chased after one who'd caught Sparky. He ran into a big old barn, and they all zoomed in after him. It was very dark inside the barn, and at first the three friends couldn't see very much in the gloom. But then Georgia muttered a few magic words, and the turquoise tip of her wand suddenly glowed brightly like a glittering blue torch. "Sparky, where are you?" she called softly, fluttering over a stack of hay bales to look behind them. Kirsty and Rachel were also flying around the barn, hoping to catch a glimpse of the guinea pig. Suddenly, Sparky gave a couple of high-pitched squeaks, and Kirsty, Rachel and Georgia flew towards the sound at once. The magic pet squeak seemed to be coming from somewhere near the barn door. Unfortunately, just as the girls and Georgia approached the door, the other goblins ran into the barn and cheered with delight to see the three fairies hovering in front of them, caught off guard. "Catch them," one of the goblins said, swinging his net around in an attempt to scoop up the fairies. "Oh, no you don't," Georgia cried, as she and the girls soared upwards away from the goblins. Kirsty managed to dodge one goblin who'd made a grab for her, but the tallest goblin of all now had her in his sights. As Kirsty flew up, the goblin swished his butterfly net down, and Kirsty was caught in its mess. "Help!" she cried, beating her wings frantically as she tried to flee. "Ha!" the tall goblin smirked, putting a warty green hand over the top of the net. "You're my prisoner now." Trapped. Georgia grabbed Rachel's hand and pulled her to a small broken window above the barn door, just as the goblin swung the door shut with a thump. "What are we going to do?" Rachel asked Georgia, her heart beating wildly as they squeezed through a hole in the window. "The goblins are holding Kirsty prisoner." Georgia's eyes were stormy. "Don't worry, we'll free her," she vowed. "We need to think of a way to rescue Kirsty and Sparky fast." Rachel and Georgia fell silent as they both thought hard. They could hear the goblins chortling triumphantly inside the barn. "A guinea pig and a fairy," one of them crowed. "What a haul!" "Jack Frost is going to be really pleased with us today," another added, sounding smug. Then Rachel and Georgia heard a scraping noise as the goblins slid the bolt across the barn door. "We'll sit tight until those other two fairies have gone," a goblin muttered. "Then we'll take this fairy and the guinea pig back to Jack Frost's castle." Rachel thought it was horrible to hear the goblins gloating. She perched on the window frame, racking her brain. "Georgia, do you think that Sparky might be able to magic himself into an elephant or something and charge the door down?" she suggested after a few moments. Georgia shook her head vigorously. "Sparky won't be able to use any magic," she told Rachel. "None of the magic pets can when they're afraid." She frowned in concentration. "We'll have to make the goblins want to leave the barn somehow," she went on. "Maybe we could tempt them out with something nice to eat." Rachel grinned as a brilliant idea suddenly popped into her head. "Or we could scare them out," she said eagerly. "Georgia, do you think you would be able to magic up the sound of an angry bull?" "Of course," Georgia replied. Then she beamed as she realized what Rachel was plotting. Of course, the sound of an angry bull who's just been woken up by noisy goblins would be just the thing to drive those goblins out of the barn, she said with a mischievous chuckle. Rachel nodded happily. "The barn is so dark that the goblins will never know that it's only fairy magic they can hear," she added. Georgia and Rachel grinned at each other and fluttered down to the ground. "Let's give it a try," Georgia said. "The sooner we free Kirsty and Sparky, the sooner we can find Little Carrot." She waved her wand, sending more turquoise sparkles swirling around Rachel. As soon as the magic fell upon her, Rachel grew back to her usual size. Then Georgia pointed her wand at the barn doors, and they shimmered for a few seconds with a magical turquoise light. "There," she whispered to Rachel. I've used magic to hold the door shut, so even if the goblins unbolt it, they won't be able to come out until we let them." Rachel smiled. "And we'll only let them out when they promise to hand over Kirsty and Sparky," she whispered back. "Brilliant, Georgia." Then, with a wink at the smiling fairy, Georgia raised her voice. "Beware of the bull," she said, as if she were reading aloud from a sign. "I remember if those goblins know they're stuck in the barn with Farmer Tom's mean old bull, they're really scared." "Phew." "He's a bad-tempered creature, way too crazy to be out in the fields," she said. "I wouldn't like to be up there if the bull wakes up." Rachel glanced up at Georgia, who was now hovering outside the window above the barn door. With a wave of her wand, the little fairy sent a stream of magic all the way into the darkness and the darkest corner of the barn. Snort, crunch, crash! A terrible grunting and bellowing started up where Georgia's magic had landed, complete with a thunderous hoof-stamping sound. Georgia flew back down to perch on Rachel's shoulder, trying not to laugh out loud at their clever trick. Rachel pressed her ear to the barn door to listen to the goblins. "Whose stupid idea was it to come in here anyway?" one of them hissed nervously. "Farmer Tom's crazy bull sounds really angry," another goblin stuttered. Rachel and Georgia heard the sound of the bolt being pulled back, and then one of the goblins tried to push the door open, but, of course, Georgia's magic was holding the door firmly shut. "You're trapped in there," Rachel couldn't resist telling the goblins, "with Farmer Tom's mad bull. Maybe the bull will make a nice pet for Jack Frost," Georgia suggested sweetly. "Hey, let us out right now," a goblin demanded, thumping on the door. "I don't think so," Georgia replied with her silvery fairy voice. Then she zoomed up to the window and waved her wand again, sending more magic into the barn. Immediately, the ferocious, bellowing, angry bull started to huff and puff, and he sounded even more bad-tempered. "Oh dear, all that shouting seems to have made the bull even angrier," Georgia remarked sorrowfully. The goblins hammered wildly on the door in panic. "Let us out right now!" they chorused. Girls and goblins agree. "You let Kirsty and Sparky go, and then we'll let you go out of the barn," Rachel said to the goblins. There was a moment's silence. "We can't go back to Jack Frost and say we've let another of those pesky pets slip through our fingers," Rachel heard a goblin say. "First we messed up the kitchen kidnap, then we bungled the bunny bagging. If we come today without the guinea pig—" "We can't go back without the guinea pig," another goblin interrupted. "But how about if we—" Rachel pressed her ear as close to the barn door as possible, but the sneaky goblins were talking so quietly now that she couldn't hear what they were plotting. "The fairy can go, but the guinea pig's staying with us," a goblin voice announced after a moment. Rachel looked at Georgia in dismay. She hadn't been expecting that response. "What should we say?" she whispered. "Let's agree, and then at least we know Kirsty's safe," Georgia replied. "Perhaps one of you will be able to grab Sparky as the goblins come out of the barn." Rachel nodded. "Okay," she hissed. Then she turned back to the barn door. "It's a deal," she shouted to the goblins. "Set Kirsty free." There was an anxious moment or two as Rachel and Georgia waited to see if the goblins were plotting a trick of their own, but then Kirsty zoomed out of the window and flew down to join them, smiling with relief. Georgia waved her hand, and thus her wand, and turned Kirsty back into a girl. Rachel hugged her tightly. "Are you all right? Were they mean to you and Sparky?" she asked. "I'm fine," Kirsty said, "and so's Sparky. He's been very quiet, but he isn't hurt." A peevish knocking came from the other side of the barn door. "A deal's a deal," one of the goblins yelled. "Open up before this crazy bull finds us." Georgia pointed her wand at the doors. "Now we're going to try and grab the goblin who's got Sparky, okay?" Rachel said to Kirsty. Kirsty nodded. "He was standing behind the others at the back," she told Rachel quickly. "Ready when you are, Georgia." Georgia waved her wand. The barn doors glittered with bright blue light again, and then burst open. The goblins immediately raced out of the barn. "Quick, before the bull starts chasing us," one of them said. Rachel and Kirsty made a lunge for the last goblin, who was clutching Sparky, but the hands closed around empty air as he dodged them nimbly and sprinted away across the field. "He's getting away!" cried Rachel in despair. Kirsty looked around frantically for something she could use to stop the goblin. Suddenly, she spotted an old coil of rope just inside the barn. "Georgia, could you help magic that rope into a lasso for me?" she asked quickly. "Yes, of course," the fairy replied, waving her wand in a pattern that sent turquoise fairy dust spiralling along the length of the rope. The frayed old rope immediately turned into a lasso and flew straight up into Kirsty's hand. Kirsty swung the loop of the lasso round her hand, keeping her eyes fixed firmly on the goblin who had Sparky. Then she launched the lasso straight at him. The girls held their breath as the lasso threw into the air. It seemed to be heading a little wide, but Georgia quickly pointed her wand at it, and the lasso shone with blue magic and veered back on course towards the goblin. The loop of rope fell right over the goblin's head and caught tight around his middle, pinning his arms by his side. The goblin kept running, but the rope pulled itself magically out of Kirsty's hands and wound itself around the goblin's legs until he had to stop. "Got him!" Kirsty cheered jubilantly. Odd one out. "Help!" the lassoed goblin yelled to his friends, but they were all far too busy running away from the imaginary bull to notice. Rachel and Kirsty walked calmly over to the struggling goblin. Sparky, who was still in the goblin's arms, squeaked a welcome. "Come here, Sparky," Rachel said, gently lifting him out of the goblin's fingers. Sparky squeaked even louder when he saw Georgia fluttering in midair, and with a twitch of his nose he jumped up towards her. As he was leaping through the air, he shrank into his usual size, and Georgia picked him up happily for a cuddle. "Hey, what about me?" the goblin shouted crossly, still tangled in the rope. Georgia smiled at him. "Don't worry, the magic will wear off the lasso soon," she assured him. "In a couple of hours or so you'll be free." "A couple of hours?" the goblin groaned. Georgia winked at Kirsty and Rachel as they began making their way back to Pet's Corner. "It will only be a couple of minutes, really," she whispered with a laugh. Sparky started squeaking urgently, and suddenly Georgia looked worried. "Of course," she cried. "We must find poor little Carrot. I'd almost forgotten about him." Rachel looked at her watch. "It's 4:15 already," she said. "Kirsty, we have to meet your mum in 15 minutes. We don't have long to find Carrot." "Then I'll turn you back into fairies," Georgia said, waving her hand briskly. "That way we can all fly round and look for him. Let's split up and meet back at Carrot's hutch in 5 minutes." Fairy-sized once again, Rachel and Kirsty zoomed off in different directions, searching for the little lost guinea pig. Kirsty checked out the play area, the cow barn, and even peeped through the windows of the gift shop, while Rachel hunted around the pig pen, the duck pond, and the stables. But there was no sign of Carrot anywhere. "I don't understand it," Georgia said when they met up again in 5 minutes. "Where could he be?" "We should go soon," Rachel said ruefully, "but I can't bear to leave the farm without knowing that Carrot's safe." Kirsty suddenly pointed ahead to where a mother hen was being followed by her line of chicks. "Wait a minute," she said, narrowing her eyes. "There's an odd-looking chick at the end of the line." Rachel looked over to where Kirsty was pointing, and then giggled in relief. The last chick in the line was not yellow and fluffy like its fellows. It was a small carrot-coloured guinea pig. "Carrot's adopted the new family," Georgia chuckled. "How sweet!" Sparky scampered over to Carrot and squeaked at him conversationally. Georgia, Rachel and Kirsty watched as Carrot looked at Sparky, then back at the chicks as if he was working something out. Then he rubbed noses with Sparky and squeaked a reply. Georgia grinned. "He says he's enjoyed being part of the hen family, but thinks he ought to go home now, she translated. And we think so too, little carrot. Georgia checked that nobody else was in sight, then waved her wand over Rachel and Kirsty, turning them back into girls. Kirsty went over and picked up Carrot. Come on, she said gently, let's take you back to your hutch. As soon as Kirsty had placed Carrot back in his hutch, Rosie and Millie, Carrot's mum and aunt, rushed over and squeaked at Carrot excitedly. Then all three of them rubbed noses together, and Carrot nestled against Rosie, looking very content. Georgia waved her wand to make sure that the cage door was tightly shut. So there'll be no more going out back to the hen house, okay? She said to Carrot with a smile. Then she picked up Sparky and turned to the girls. It's nearly 4 o'clock. You'd better go, she told them. And we should fly back to Fairyland too, where I'm going to make sure Jack Frost never gets anywhere near you again. Sparky nuzzled George's arm and she stroked him gently. Thank you for everything, she said to Kirsty and Rachel. And Sparky says thank you too. Kirsty and Rachel hugged the tiny fairy goodbye and gave Sparky a gentle stroke. Sparky squeaked goodbye to all the girls and then squeaked in the direction of Carrot's cage. A volley of squeaks came back in reply, as if the farm guinea pigs were calling out their goodbyes too. And then, with a burst of turquoise sparkles that fizzled and glittered in the afternoon sunlight, Georgia and Sparky vanished. Rachel and Kirsty watched as the air rippled with a strange turquoise shimmer, and then it was over. There you are, girls, came a voice, and Rachel and Kirsty turned to see Mrs. Tate walking towards them. Have you had a nice day? Great, thanks, Mum, Kirsty replied with a smile. Wasn't it, Rachel? Oh, yes, Rachel agreed. She grinned broadly as she noticed a pot of sunflower seeds, some diced apple, and a whole pile of carrot sticks in the guinea pig's cage. She felt sure the food was a gift from Georgia. It definitely hadn't been there before. Today's been absolutely magic, Rachel sighed happily. The end.